I will leave you in the first in the capable hands of my colleague Fahan, who will be here while Andrea gets online. Ms. Andrea, if we could put him up on the big screen.
Good afternoon, sir.
Excellent, Andrea. Nice to see you. We'll let you make some opening remarks, and then we'll take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please, please make your opening remarks now. Thanks very much.
Thank you all. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining in August for indeed what is going to be my last briefing to you from Jerusalem. Tomorrow we will cross the 300 days of war. It's kind of a coincidence that I am, doing this briefing at this very sad ticking of the time. In the recent weeks, we have seen more evacuation order in Gaza. We have published this in our reportings, which has created more displacement of people. And what was particularly worrisome in this phase that those evacuation order have hit areas or involved areas that were considered within the safe zone, within the humanitarian safe zone unilaterally declared by Israel. We had more than 200,000 people on the move, and they were desperately looking for places where to find safety. And in the last 2 days, we have seen actually spontaneous return after the withdrawal of the troops from the ground. Of course, we are trying to assess the impact of those operations and the impact on services, and we will keep on trying to deliver a response to those people in those areas. The reality, though, remains that in our ability to deliver, our ability to deliver has never gone up to scale where it should be. We keep on counting trucks, unfortunately, but it's not about how many trucks cross the border, but is our ability to scale up. And honestly, we have never been allowed to get there. The toll of the war is still increasing. We are now more than 39,000 killed, fatalities in Gaza as of the 31st of July. The Ministry of Health of Gaza has confirmed the identity of 28,000 out of these 39,000. And they could confirm over 9,000 children, over 2,400 elderly, and over 5,300 women among those. The number of people injured have reached and has passed 91,000 people. Ali, can you please mute yourself? Iftikhar. And on the Israeli side, the war so far has generated 1,200 fatalities, including 33 children. There has been more than 5,400 injured. And specifically in Gaza, we had the government of Israel has given data about those fatalities. We had 329 fatalities and 2,173 injured. And of course, we still have 115 remaining hostages, for whom the United Nations has constantly asked, of course, the immediate release and the human treatment. The conflict has displaced so far 1.9 million people. This is 90% of the entire population in Gaza. Since the 22nd of June, 11% of the people have been displaced again. And these displacements are recurrent. It's not only one, it's multiple displacement, again and again, constantly. Colleagues of UN Habitat and UNOSAT have published yesterday a staggering numbers of the impact of the war. They said that over 60% of residential buildings have been destroyed. There has been 49 million tons of debris generated by the war. 49 millions. And 151,000 structures have been destroyed. We unfortunately have registered positive cases on samples taken on sewage of polio. You might have heard this, and colleagues of WHO and the humanitarian community are working as we speak about putting up a plan to deal with the polio, the risk of polio contamination. Food insecurity remains prevalent, as you have all known. The IPC has registered 495,000 in IPC5, which is the highest level of food insecurity. And this is a projection between 1st of May and 30th of September. And of course, this marks the 300 days, not only for all this suffering for Gaza, but also for the long standing of the hostages kept in, the people kept in hostages by militant groups in Gaza. In this environment, we do a lot. We provide people with water, food, tents, clothes, hygiene items, nutritional supplements, and cash. We equip hospitals with beds, stretchers, medicine, meals, and facilitate medical evacuation. You might have seen yesterday, the day before yesterday was Tuesday, WHO managed to evacuate 85 patients. We deliver fuel to medical centers, bakery, pumping stations, desalination plants, sewage facility, and telecommunication providers, which are a lifeline to keep connection with the people and among people. We provide IDPs information about where they can find medical care, where they can find shelter, where they can find services for gender-based survivors. And of course, we reach people about the existence of and the presence of unexploded ordnance. We screen children and pregnant women for malnutrition, and we train volunteers to do so in their own communities. And this is a great work that UNICEF and partners are doing. We keep on monitoring displacement trends, damages, detention, and family separations. As you can imagine, in a war zone, there is a lot of family separation situations, and there are some cases that we have witnessed ourselves that were particularly troublesome when they were affecting children. We help communities to fix water networks and water wells. We operate warehouses outside of Gaza and organize convoys and manage the flows of critical supplies. All this is done in a constant effort to listen people, because what we want is just to understand what people need and what they think their priorities are. But all these efforts are not are nowhere near where they should be in terms of helping all the people in need. We still need to be, and we are still opportunistic, and we still need to scale up our operations. There are rays of hopes at times that makes our day a bit easier. Today, for example, was the first day where UNRWA and UNICEF colleagues have managed to initiate some informal learning for 30,000 children. They've used IDP sites, basically the school that have become IDP sites, and they've launched this initiative, try to bring back to some formal learning the children of Gaza. Our work in Gaza is subject still to very heavy impediments. We have been discussing for many, many months about fuel. We found some sort of constant arrival of fuel, although not in the quantities necessary. But still the fuel is very problematic because it cannot be given to all the partners that we would like to give. And so there is a tight control on the way this fuel is distributed to partners. There are also programmatic interferences done by the Israeli authorities. The control of humanitarian aid entering the Strip, and you know that since the beginning we have been advocating for, lifting all the limitation on the type of assistance that we can bring in. We have done some step forward in some areas, but we are far from where we should be. Recently, colleagues were asking for desperately chlorine, for example, which is something that it's absolutely essential for sterilizing hospitals and water pumping stations need also that. Recently we have had, for example, big problems in bringing in cash to support our operations. And the constraint around our ability to bring in cash for our own operation has been even further limited in the recent weeks. We had also reported to you several incidents in the last 10 days. We had 4 incidents where UN convoys and partners convoys have been caught under fire. We had 2 serious incidents where the vehicles of the UN were directly hit by shooting, and other incidents where they were shooting, kind of warning shootings, but they were shot at 20 meters in front of our cars. And the last one was today, by the way, where one of our convoys was shot at 20 meters in front of the cars. Access remains a big challenge too, of course, and particularly access to people, wherever they are, wherever they need us. I frequently talk about Gaza, but I realize that I tend not to brief you about the West Bank. So I want to give you a little bit of a sense of where West Bank has moved in these 10 months. Starting from the 7th of October, the United Nations has verified 572 Palestinians that has been killed in the West Bank, of which 141 were children. The vast majority were shot by Israeli forces, and 10 by settlers, and 7 we could not yet establish the shooter. And we had also Israeli killed in the West Bank. 14 Israeli has been killed, and an Israeli in Israel also. We have recorded 8 Israelis and 5 Palestinian perpetrators have been killed. Demolitions have also continued. I was discussing with colleagues, UN colleagues, and they were explaining that the trends of demolition have changed a little bit, the patterns, where the type of demolitions seems to be now spreading all over, and also affecting houses that are in areas that were for many years untouched, in Area C in particular. But we are counting more than 1,300 structures that have been demolished. 39% of those were inhabited homes, which has generated the movement and the displacement of almost 3,000 people. Another element of concern is the type of operations that we have seen. The search and arrest operations, as we have been reporting for many years, have become the more and more frequent, and the methods are the more and more, seems to be more military operation rather than police enforcement operations. And they bring with them a huge devastation of civilian infrastructure. We have seen, for example, streets completely demolished, and sewage network demolished, and that, of course, has an impact on public health. And the difficulties also of our partners to be able to repair those sewage because of the lack of funding, and the challenge in any case to operate in those areas. We have also registered more than 1,100 incidents of settler attacks, 106 of those leading to casualties, and 900 of these leading to damage, and 120 at both damages and casualties. The One concerning element for me as UN and also for the humanitarian partners that operate in the West Bank is that the attitude of the military is becoming the more and more aggressive. We have been systematically stopped at checkpoint and identify, you know, that they request the staff to step out of the vehicle, take out the keys. They want to ID every single staff. And it seems that this is unfortunately a growing trend. And now is 10 months that most of the UN employees cannot, national staff cannot access East Jerusalem because of the lack of permits. And this issue of lack of permits and the visa in general is also becoming a problem for the international NGOs and the personnel of international NGOs that operate in the West Bank. We were discussing a couple of days ago with colleagues from the NGO. They were telling us that roughly 90% of the international staff have issue with visa. And they were saying that as we speak, basically, this is coming to, the visa of many of those is coming to an end. And in the coming weeks, most of them will have to leave the country, or they will not be able to operate, of course, here. I wanted to close with a few reflection, given that is my last one, my last briefing to you from Palestine after these 5.5 years that I've spent here. The Secretary General in November said that Gaza was becoming a graveyard for children. Unfortunately, he was right, and this is what Gaza became. The international community, the world, has to answer the question of how much human suffering can be tolerated in the name of security. How many children have to be orphaned? How many elderly need to die? How many children need to be deprived of their childhood? How many civilians have to pay the ultimate price for it? The international community must help finding a path to peace and coexistence between peoples to avoid war, conflict, and generating suffering. I'm worried about the growing anger toward Israel, awakening the dark forces that could fuel anti-Semitism. The UN keeps on calling all leaders to speak out against anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim bigotry, and hate speech of all kinds, which only reinforce discrimination, stigma, and marginalization. Dehumanizing language that incite violence is never acceptable, and unfortunately we have seen a lot of it in and around the Palestinian-Israel conflict. I've witnessed in these months the systematic dehumanization of civilians in Gaza and in West Bank. What I've witnessed in the last 10 months is the absolute physical and psychological exhaustion of an entire population. The people in Gaza have been deprived of the mere thinking of what tomorrow could bring for them. It is incredible how people in Gaza can still smile when they meet you. And it's true, whenever I go there, I meet them and they're smiling. But their smile in Gaza is framed by sad eyes. The sadness of what they have lived and they keep on living through. The danger for me, and actually for any one of our colleagues that have been bravely deciding to go to work in Gaza, UN, NGOs, and national staff that have been always on the front line. And for the entire humanity, is that we are becoming immune to horror. We cannot allow this to happen. I cannot explain this to my children. What is our credibility as the UN, as the international community, when we will try to promote international humanitarian law or human rights in other places, in other contexts, after this dark page that we are witnessing in Gaza? I still want to hold on to rays of hope, like the initiative of the informal learning activities that today started in Gaza. And we have tried, and we will keep on trying, to pierce the curtain of fog that has covered Gaza. I call once again to the need to have international journalists in Gaza. We need to have representatives of member states in Gaza. Only breathing the dust and the smelling of the odors of the living condition in Gaza, the world will realize what's happening there. It is not a rhetorical thought. I really believe, after these 5 years, that there cannot be peace without justice. And in the name of humanity, we need a ceasefire and long-lasting peace, not only for the people of Palestine and Israel, but for all of us, for all of you, us, of human beings. Thank you very much.
I'll now open the floor up for questions. Maggie.
Andrea, hi, it's Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. Thank you so much for doing this briefing and for the many briefings you've done for us over the last 10 months and for your service. Good luck at your next post. Just on the matter of your visa, though, could you just tell us why it wasn't renewed and how often do international staff usually have to renew them? How frequently?
So visa in the past were given for 1 year. After the beginning of the war, for those visas that were issued, were given for a much shorter time, 3 to 6 months. 3 was the practice. Then there was a moment where Israel decided to extend this to 6 months. But then the practice is a bit inconsistent, and that depends clearly on the relation and the perception that the authority have of the work we do. In my case specifically, I was given recently a 1-month extension, and I was warned that that would have not been renewed beyond this 1 month. The reason that has been put on the table was is the straw that broke the camel's back, is the publication of the Children and Armed Conflict report from the United Nations, and they alluded to long-standing issue of reporting that OCHA has been doing. But this has been communicated verbally. There is no formal communication that I received, despite asking repeatedly for that.
Okay, and then could you just bring us up to date on how many crossing points are functioning currently, either partially or fully functioning into Gaza?
So at the moment we have Karem Shalom, which is has always been the main entry point for assistance, which is coming from the south, as you know. It's very complicated to operate. As of today, as UN, we managed to do roughly 30 trucks a day because of the different zones that have been evacuated and the internal security that we have frequently reported about that is making big challenges for us. There is quite some private sector operating. I've seen yesterday, for example, there was quite a large number of private trucks that entered, 140, if I'm not mistaken, probably more, a bit more. And then you have Zikim in the north, that when we managed to staff it properly, which is not always the case because of security in the middle area that does not allow our teams to go to the north. Zikim also is open. It gave an average, I think, of 40 to 50 trucks a day. And this is the only entry point for the north. So in the north today, there was a team on the north. And for example, there is a desperate need of fresh food. There is no vegetable, no fruit going to the north since now a long time. And the prices have skyrocketed for the little commodities available in the market. And even canned food is increasingly pricey because of the lack of sufficient support entering into the north.
Abdelhamid?
And we use the fence road, and we can enter from gate 96 at time. This is facilitated, but we can run roughly 30 trucks every time. We can use it up. We've used it up 3 times a week. There was a discussion to have it up to 5 times a week, and we are discussing this with Israel.
Thank you, Andrea. This is Abdelhamid Sayam. First, I want to wish you the best of luck in your next move. I'm sure the Palestinian people will remember your sincerity, passion, and hard work. I have 2 questions. First, I noticed that you did not talk about Palestinians who are in jail, and there are many of them. You spoke always, every UN official talk about the 115 hostages, and they must be released immediately, but they forget to talk about like 21,000 Palestinians, especially in this detention center in Gaza. which is called the Guantanamo of Gaza, as you probably know. And I want your input about the torture of some prisoners. One of them was raped, and now 5 Israelis are in jail and being questioned about that incident. But I want to ask you one last thing. If you want to put a title for your briefing now, as you are leaving, what else could be named other than genocide or a final solution for all Palestinians? Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul Amir, for the question. So on the detainees, I didn't speak about it because I'm not sufficiently informed about it. You have seen the OCHA has done recently, a couple of days ago, I think, they published a report on that, and because that's their job, and so they're much more versed than me to cover this. But I agree with you. The situation of detainees, the occasion in which I had the opportunity to talk of some of those who have been released, and it happened to me a couple of times when I was in Gaza. The stories that they tell you, the account of their detention are really troublesome, to say the minimum. And I'll leave then the colleagues of OCHR to come and brief you on details on the content of their findings on the report. For me, I was thinking today, what is the last message that I want to leave behind? And for me, really, the most worrisome part is we cannot allow anybody to become immune to horror, because that's what is happening. What we are witnessing every day, we were thinking with colleagues, at the beginning of the war, when there was strikes that were hitting 20 people, we were horrified and we were shocked. It became, unfortunately, through these months a daily reality, and the risk is to get used to it, and we should not, we cannot. So please, let's not become immune to horror. We cannot. Thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, sir, for taking the time to do the briefing. I have 2 questions for you. Number one, what has the transition been like since the J-Lots, the pier, was closed down and transferred over to the port of Ashdod? Has there been any greater efficiency in delivery of humanitarian aid over the last couple of weeks? And secondly, you made a comment, I apologize if I'm misquoting you, said there cannot be peace without justice. Can you expand a little bit upon what you mean by that?
Thank you for the question. So the J-Lot, the transition of the J-Lot has been relatively smooth, in the sense that the convoys or the ships that were delivering in Ashdod before have now become the priority for the maritime route. For sure, the port is much more equipped than the J-Lot to accept assistance at scale. But the challenge remained the ability to bring in that assistance. So if we go with 40 trucks a day, 50 trucks a day from Zekin, which is in the north, which is the natural entry point from that route, of course, is not yet where it should be. And as I said earlier, it's far from being. Now, 10 months into this war, it's the ability that we have to deliver assistance is far from being where we should be. We keep on saying that the scale of our assistance should be much bigger and should be continuous, both to the north and to the south. So welcoming every effort that has been done and accepted to increase that flows of aid, but I don't think that we are where we should be. For me, when we speak about justice in this place, first and foremost mean to respect and protect civilians. The number of violations of basic rights that we have seen in Gaza in this month is countless. And how many we will discover throughout the next months and years, because our ability, in fact, to verify all this is still very limited. And same goes for any other violation that has been done, and includes the West Bank. The demolition that I've described, settler violence incidents, the difficulties of the day-to-day living in the West Bank. It's something that cannot be tolerated, and for sure, it's not something that is ensuring an environment where peace can be built. When in fact, peace is needed for everybody, for Palestinians and for Israeli in this land.
Deji?
Hi, Andrea. This is Xu Dezhi with China Central Television. Wish you all good luck on your new post. I just want to confirm the answer you answered to Maggie, that there are only 2 border crossings that are currently working in Gaza. Is that correct?
That is correct. When we use 96, the gate 96, in fact, we enter through Kerem Shalom, then we do all the scanning, and then from there, the convoys goes along the fence road and enter 96. So it's not a separate entry point directly from outside, let's say.
Okay, so my question, actually 2 questions. First, we heard, Steph, that there's the spreading visa issue with the UN staffer here. You're leaving. Do you have what would be the impact for your office that if they don't renew your visa? And secondly, you've traveled to Gaza many times, and you were here during briefing many times. Given the situation now, do you see any silver lining for Gazan people? Thank you.
So, as I said earlier, I wanted to hang on rays of hope. And initiatives like the one started today to initiate this learning space for children is a good and positive move. It is far from what we need. It is far from what we should be able to do, and is only for 30,000 children. So when there are many more that would deserve and need to be taken care of. And it's not only learning; those spaces become spaces for protection, where you can check on the health of the children. You understand their needs. You can then support them and reach their families, and so it's super important. We learned through this 10 months to satisfy ourselves with little step forward. Clearly, it's a complicated situation where the constraints put upon us have been immense, and many of those still remain unchanged. But we have moved the dial, and the mere fact that the list that I've made earlier about all the efforts and the delivery that the humanitarian communities, and that includes NGO staff, national and international, that are proudly and bravely doing their job every day in very dangerous circumstances. That's what I see as the silver line. We need simply to build upon this and increase our ability to reach and deliver people. We need to bring peace and dignity to people. That's the 2 things that they ask, and we are not giving up on this. The impact of the non-renewal of a visa, it's luckily I have a very strong team, and the humanitarian community is strong. But my fear is that this is something that will not stop here. As I said earlier, NGOs visa are not working visa in Palestine are not renewed, and we're talking about a lot of organizations that delivers everyday assistance to people, both in Gaza and in the West Bank. So this is very problematic. And as far as my position is concerned, I don't think that this job can be done remotely. I think that it is important to stay in country, interact with the parties, both Israeli, Palestinians, and interact with partners. You cannot exert leadership and coordinate humanitarian response remotely. So I hope that there will be the space built around in the coming weeks to find a solution and to allow my replacement to come in. And in the meantime, my colleagues that will remain here will have to take the heavy lifting on covering, multiple tasks and multiple jobs. And this could be done for some time, but is not sustainable, is not the right way to provide the assistance we have to provide to Palestinians.
Right?
Thank you, Andira. Murad Hashim, Al Jazeera Arabic. You said that you've never been allowed to scale up the humanitarian operation in Gaza. Could you please elaborate more on why? What are the main reasons? Who is responsible on that?
So we have been discussing this many times, and we have systematically reported all the challenges that we find in terms of scaling up our operations. In any other place where such a gigantic catastrophe happened, the ability for humanitarian to scale up operation, which means bringing more equipment, bringing people, bringing more material, bringing more aid, bringing expertise that you needed to tackle new problems. Those are, normally free. They can be brought in without difficulties. And this is not the case here. Both in terms of the humanitarian items that we can bring in, there are limitations and constraints imposed by the government of Israel. Some for legitimate concerns on security. Others, I'm not sure what is the problem. Educational material, for example, has been declined over and over, and I found that simply unacceptable, because they said that it's not humanitarian in nature. It's something that really have created within the humanitarian community a lot of frustrations. Then the movement of people. Every time we move people in and out, we have to go through a very cumbersome, complicated process that requires a full deployment of many armored vehicles from the UN with international drivers that have to go through a very complicated process that takes hours. This last week was quite smooth, I have to say, for example, but smooth means 6-8 hours of work for several colleagues of the UN that had to bring colleagues from NGOs and UN to the border to cross in and out. The access inside Gaza, there are areas where we still cannot access freely, and we have to go through the checkpoints, military checkpoints of the Israeli. And the checkpoints, as I said earlier, are an area where we had frequently incidents, 4 in the last 10 days. Despite the fact that our vehicles are perfectly identifiable, our movement are coordinated with the Israeli army, and still we got under fire, or direct fire, or warning fires, or direct fire. So it's simply very complicated. Security. Our colleagues from security in the UN have called repeatedly for finding a solution to improve the security, the communications, because the conditions upon which we're working in Gaza are uniquely dangerous, and we are uniquely unequipped to deal with those dangers. So it's the ecosystem that you need to operate properly a humanitarian operation, and what will allow you then to scale up that has never been there since the very beginning.
I believe that's all for questions. So I would like once more, Andrea, thanks for all of the great work you've done and your briefings, and I wish you the best of luck in your work ahead. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Farhan, and thank you, colleagues.
Okay, all right. Thanks. Have a good afternoon, everyone.